Today we're exploring the question, when science alone cannot answer a question, how do we decide what to believe? Okay, so science is an awesome tool for understanding the physical world, but we cannot answer every type of question with the scientific method. Even scientists understand this. There are metaphysical, moral, philosophical, and existential questions that require a different kind of reasoning, and the good news is we employ this type of reasoning all the time. We're using it whenever we're evaluating claims about history or philosophy or even relationships or just decision making in daily life. So today I want to formally introduce 3 simple ways that we can evaluate beliefs when the scientific method, as I mentioned, or laboratory is not enough, because as C.S. Lewis said, I am not asking anyone to accept Christianity if his best reasoning tells him that the weight of evidence is against it. The first test is logical coherence. Does this belief make sense? Is it rational? And is it internally consistent? So imagine that we're approaching a bridge and we're not sure whether or not it's safe to cross. There's one person who says, yes, it's safe. There's another person who says, no, it's not safe. And a third person who says, yeah, it's safe, but it can't support our weight. The first 2 claims are logically consistent. That doesn't mean that either one of them is true, but at a basic level, they are rational possibilities. But then right away, we see that that third claim, that the bridge is safe, but it can't support our weight, that fails the test of logical coherence. It's internally inconsistent because either the bridge is safe and can support our weight, or it's unsafe and can't support our weight, right? So we can apply the same test of logical consistency to other beliefs and worldviews too. As an example, see if you can spot the logical problems in these very common statements. All beliefs are equally valid. There are no absolute truths. You shouldn't judge anyone. We can only believe what we can prove scientifically. We can't trust reason. So consider the first one. All beliefs are equally valid. If that were true, then it would also include beliefs that disagree with that statement, which means that it cancels itself out. Or the second one, there are no absolute truths. That statement presents itself as absolutely true while denying that any absolute truths exist, which again makes itself logically inconsistent. In the same way, you shouldn't judge anyone. That itself is a judgment. It's logically inconsistent. The statement, we can only believe what can be scientifically proven, doesn't work either because that claim itself isn't something that science can prove. It's a philosophical rule about knowledge. It is not a scientific finding. And we can't trust reason is problematic because it relies on reasoning to argue against reason, which of course undercuts the statement itself. Okay, so zooming out a bit, this test doesn't apply only to individual statements like the ones I just read. It also applies to entire worldviews, whether that's Christianity, atheism, relativism, naturalism, determinism, or anything else. And that's why it's fair to ask questions like, does the Bible contain contradictions? Or if only science gives knowledge, then how do we know that that claim is true? Or if our thoughts are only shaped by survival, then why would we trust them to discover truth? Or can nothing create our universe? So logical consistency, like I mentioned at the top, it doesn't make a statement or worldview true, but real contradictions should raise serious questions. We either need to resolve the tensions with good explanations, or the view would rightly lose credibility. As Aristotle put it, it is impossible for anyone to believe the same thing to be and not be. The second test is whether the belief fits the facts. So does it account for what we observe about reality, or does it conflict with the available evidence? Returning to the bridge example, so we have already ruled out the logical inconsistent claim that the bridge is both safe and not supporting our weight. And that leaves us with the 2 coherent possibilities, that the bridge is safe or that it's not safe. So now we can move from possibility to evidence. So for the bridge, we might ask questions like, how was it engineered? What materials is it made from? Are there similar bridges that safely support people? And what do experts observe about this particular bridge? We can also just directly look at the bridge itself, right? Are there cracks? Are there missing supports? Are there warning signs? Are there any barriers placed by engineers? Or does the bridge appear well-maintained and structurally sound? Do we see people crossing it? So this kind of evidence helps us decide which explanation best fits reality, and we can apply the same test to individual statements statements and entire worldviews as well. Like, did the universe have a beginning? Is human consciousness reducible to purely physical processes? Do moral values exist? Did Jesus exist as a historical figure? And then when we look at the available evidence, which view of Jesus, whether that's Christian or Islamic or Mormon or something else, which best fits the facts? So again, this does not mean that we're going to get absolute certainty when we look at the available evidence. Both in science and philosophy, we ask which view explains most of the data available to us now, which view makes the most sense based on what we actually observe, and then which view requires fewer unsupported assumptions. Just for a moment, I want to zoom in on this last point for a moment, that we should prefer claims that require fewer unsupported assumptions. William Ockham wrote, "A plurality is not to be posited without necessity." It can be tempting to add extra unseen assumptions to preserve a preferred belief. For example, saying that the bridge must be supported by invisible beams, that sort of thing would add unnecessary complexity. We kind of broached this the other week when we talked about the multiverse as a possible explanation for the fine-tuning of the universe. This is something that we have no direct observational evidence for yet. And that doesn't mean that it's wrong, but it does add significant complexity without improving how well a naturalistic explanation accounts for the facts. In fairness, some other people would maybe say that God adds unnecessary complexity to a claim, but others would argue that God isn't just an extra layer being added to avoid the evidence, but instead the single unifying explanation that accounts for many aspects of reality at once. Which some philosophers consider to be simpler than simply, multiplying the evidence. So in any case, when a belief consistently fits the historical, scientific, experiential, or philosophical facts, its explanatory power increases, and then when a belief ignores or conflicts with strong evidence, or when it creates unnecessary complexity, its credibility decreases. The third test is livability. Does this belief match real human experience in a way we can put into practice, or does it conflict with how we naturally experience and navigate life? So, returning to our bridge example one last time, just imagine that there is someone who insists that the bridge is perfectly safe, but then they refuse to cross it themselves. So even if their claim sounds logical, and even if they say the evidence supports it, their behavior itself reveals something important, that even they do not fully trust the claim that they're defending. Or you can imagine the opposite, right? That someone confidently claims that the bridge is safe, then they walk onto it, and then the bridge collapses. In that case, the problem isn't the inconsistency, it's that the belief fails when it's put into practice. So a belief may sound convincing in theory, but if it cannot be lived out safely or consistently in the real world, then that raises some serious questions about whether or not it actually fits reality. Okay. So livability tests whether a belief can be practiced, not just stated. I really like the way the philosopher Dallas Willard puts it. He said, "There is no avoiding the fact that we live at the mercy of our ideas." For example, we might claim that the truth doesn't exist while still expecting others to take our statements seriously. Or we might argue that moral values are subjective while we're continuing to speak and act as if some things are truly wrong. Or we might say that we're not truly responsible for our own actions while we're still really expecting accountability and good behavior from others and get offended by others' bad behavior. Or we might claim that things like feelings or desires or even suffering are ultimately illusions while we're still deeply wanting things or pursuing meaning or experiencing pain and recognizing distress. So all of those are examples that show a tension between theory and reality, between what we argue in the abstract and then what we actually rely on when we live our lives. So beliefs should absolutely be logically consistent and supported by evidence. They should also align with the realities of the world that we actually live in. We live our lives in a way that we can consistently practice our beliefs. Because if our beliefs only win at a theoretical level, then we have good reason to question whether or not they actually reflect reality. C.S. Lewis, he captured this idea when he said, "I believe in Christianity as I believe that the sun has risen, not only because I see it, but because by it I see everything else." Here, his point wasn't just that Christianity sounded convincing in theory, but that it actually aligned with and helped explain the way we already experience morality and reason and longing and suffering and beauty and meaning in our lives. Okay, so wrapping up, science can't answer every question, and that's really okay. We have other ways of reasoning and evaluating whether or not a belief or a claim is true. That includes asking whether or not a claim is logically coherent, whether or not it fits the facts, and whether or not it's something that we can actually live with and test and do consistently. So even if we never reach 100% certainty, and if we're honest, we almost never do, we do have enough information to make thoughtful, reasonable decisions about what to believe and then act on them. So if you are up for it in the comments, I would love to know, have you ever changed your mind about something after realizing it didn't actually make sense or didn't match reality? And can you think of a belief or idea that sounds convincing in theory, but then becomes difficult to live out in practice? Of course, if you have questions about this topic or other topics related to Christianity, please add those to the comments too, and I will do my best to respond there or in a future video. And if you want to see more content like this, you can click the subscribe button below the video, and I will see you next week.